Millions of women have similar problems and similar actions to this particular woman, but I honestly can't think of somebody better that encapsulates it, as well as somebody so prominent, so I figured that Mia Khalifa would be a good person to do a video on. Now, I'm of the opinion, and perhaps a controversial opinion, that the vast majority of women alive today are, in a sense, sort of grieving. And I think the epitome of this, or the place where this is expressed most obviously, is with porn stars, because they, in a way, manifest the great error of this age that women are continually falling for. So enter the person we're looking into today, Mia Khalifa. She was a porn star for around about 3 months, and has tried over the last few years to move on with her life. Now, what makes her significant and so well known is that she did a porn video in hijab. Now, this, alongside other factors, led to her being viewed by a minimum of 700 million men and a maximum of around 1.2 billion. So that many men have seen her get railed on camera. Now, obviously this is a horrific thing to have happened, and she probably didn't bank on this. But I think that the extremeness of this case gives us a lot to learn about human psychology, and so we're going to have a look at this today.
These guys, they just saw you, frankly, as a money machine.
Absolutely.
But you still had no advisors, you had no lawyer, you had no nothing. So
What 21-year-old has a lawyer on retainer?
I'm just trying to get my head around how stressful this must have been, and whether even now, because you sit here so poised and obviously a lot of time has passed and you've moved on, but do you think there is some sort of post-traumatic stress that is in you from this experience?
Yes, and I think it kicks in mostly when I go out in public, because the stares I get, I feel like people can see through my clothes, and it brings me deep shame. It makes me feel like I lost all right to my privacy, which I did, because I'm one Google search away.
Yeah. And those images you cannot expunge. You have no right, even though it is deeply personal to you, you have no right to remove them from anybody's view around the world.
Yeah.
Now, initially I did a reasonable amount of, quote, research by watching interviews and reading articles on her, and initially she struck me as quite conceited, to be honest. I thought she was quite brash, and I'd argue somewhat masculine in how she talks. But then I realised, by the way that I live, that I don't tend to meet women like this, and that the language she uses is very much that of the average Western woman. So they're going to talk something like that. And eventually I realised that she's kind of a wounded animal, and in a sense there's a bit of lashing out going on here. I think it was really foolish of me to think that there may be some humility here, not because Mia is a horrific person, she evidently isn't, but because the society at large today does not preach that. It preaches pride and egotism over anything else, because there's no value seen in humility. While I think that a lot could have been learnt if there was more humility focused on. I, of course, stand as a kind of person who has the opinion that humility is the greatest virtue, and the people I surround myself with tend to embody that, but this is not the case in the rest of the society. I especially felt this way when I heard her story through these interviews, her early life. Now tell me if you've heard this story before. A woman feels insecure in her teenage years and seeks to develop a level of confidence. Then hits the thought of the modern world, where women should obtain this confidence by being promiscuous and by acting out with men, girl power kind of stuff. And so she changes her life to be more attractive, and seeks that validation through this promiscuity. However, as the natural law dictates, promiscuity shatters her into pieces through this pursuit. This is essentially her story. And it's repeated so many times in the modern world, I thought it would be really foolish of me not to comment on it. Now, of course, Mia is this about times 15. In fact, her life seems to be the platonic form of this. She came into the United States as an immigrant from Lebanon. She was attacked at school for her background and for being overweight, and she went through this transformation at university where she lost a lot of weight and of course participated in the lifestyle. And of course one thing led to another. She met a guy on the beach in Miami who told her about porn. She got involved in that, and then of course she got big, and all this horrific stuff has now happened to her. Her family's disowned her. Men, of course, recognise her in the street constantly. I mean, when you've been seen by a billion guys getting railed, then what do you expect? And she's not even reaping the profits of her quote-unquote work. I can't blame her for being pissed off, to be honest. Now, of course, I don't think anybody really watching can relate to this, unless somehow this ends up in her hands, but I can imagine getting that glassy stare off of men who have burped the worm to you dozens of times must be pretty creepy, and you must really hate yourself, particularly considering how women are. I mean, as a man you would be annoyed by this, I reckon, but as a woman, like, seeing somebody who's drained the snake to you, that must fucking really fuck you up, really badly. I'd be pretty furious too if I were a woman, and that were the case. But of course, she needs to acknowledge that this is her own fault. She shouldn't have done this. And I think I've figured out why she and many, many other women end up in this sort of situation, either on Pornhub or just within groups of friends. Now, interestingly enough, she is of a Christian, specifically Catholic Christian background, and something that is common to all of these Abrahamic religions are the rules on idolatry. Now, these are so heavily enforced because we become like unto that which we worship. So if we worship God, then we become like unto God. So she appears, though, to have made the understandable error of putting attention first, which is admittedly very, very common for women in the modern age. And so they become like unto the attention that they seek. And attention is fleeting, intense, and exceptionally powerful for very brief moments, and it also crushes you utterly when any very basic reputational or moral faults appear in your behaviour. So we have to be aware of this, because this has clearly happened to this woman, this poor woman. Now, of course, I'm not going to be able to convince everyone, or even anybody, of natural moral law in one video, but if you take one thing away from this and away from this story, it's that you should never ever pursue validation primarily, because you end up in sticky situations like this, and this just happens to be one of the more prominent and quite sad examples of this. So I really hope that you guys learnt a lot from this, because I think that we often neglect these sorts of stories, either because they make us feel uncomfortable, or because we just sneer and think that we're somehow better than this, which frankly we aren't. So I hope that you've learned from this analysis, this very short analysis granted. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Goodbye. A very big thank you to those on the list here. These are subscribers to the Renaissance Man program who get audiobooks and controversial videos every week for $5 a month. There's already quite a lot of content there, so if you check it out in the description, you won't be missing out. Thank you.